What we need is to pause and to reflect. This is the one favor we can do ourselves as Black people, to say, wait, let's take time out. What has happened in the past 30 years and what is likely to happen in the next 30 years? And then to find a path of a common agenda to rescue ourselves.
Nkululeko on Cultr.
Ngokeliam, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for always being available to speak to us on Nkululeko on Cultr. The last time we spoke was in October. You helped me a lot as we engaged about content and the need for content to help Black people instead of harming Black people. Now I want to space the content as well. And I was watching I've been watching a lot of your content, Ngqawana Speaks podcast, and I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying your inputs as well there. Otherwise, you feeling good?
No, I'm good. Thank you. And I'm happy to be back again.
Yes, thank you so much, man. I heard you speak about blackness and queerness and feminism. And it is through your teaching that I got to know, and a lot of other people as well, about Dr. Francis Cresswell's Black men have never presided over a capture of Black women to a point where we could technically be considered as oppressors to Black women. And you always make very smart and very clear observations about that why is it that there's always this push for us to be antagonistic towards each other as Black men and Black women?
Yeah, part of the problem is the hegemony of what we call white feminism. And it projects the Black man as the problem, as the, predator, the, phallic power, which must be destroyed.
Yeah.
It is part of the Western imagination in the creation of the Black man as the problem. So this white feminism, it is so pervasive in South Africa. And in the universities, that's what it is taught formally. And so our feminist movement is hugely influenced by this anti-Black men specifically feminist project. And that is why, there was a shutdown another time for violence against women. And Black men were excluded even to work in that space. But white men and white women were part of the project. So, unfortunately, it would appear that the whole feminist project is being mobilized and organized against the Black men. In fact, Ngqawana, when I spoke to him on my podcast, he spoke about how when they came at the time of Fees Must Fall, they visited vets and there they were being shamboked by Black sisters. As the problem.
Yeah.
So the feminist movement has therefore been colonized by anti-Blackness, which then just sustains the intra-Black project of fighting amongst ourselves. And it diverts attention from white supremacy, which is really the big problem, which also is the result of white supremacy that we find Black fracturing. We fracture in many ways, just like the project of xenophobia, so-called.
Yeah.
It is a consequence of white supremacy where Black-on-Black violence is being generated to defocus us, to use Mbalula's word, from the real problem, which is white supremacy. So our critique of the feminist project is precisely from a Black perspective to say Black feminism understands the problem of white supremacy as impacting of both the Black men and the Black women equally. And therefore we need to unite in this fight against the common problem. Then there's the proliferation of sexual identities, which is part of the degeneration, if you like, of the capitalist order, which now I must claim my rights as a queer person against a straight person. This is again a proliferation of byproducts of the main problem, which is white supremacy. We should not at all discriminate amongst ourselves in the intramural, as it were, the black space, just like we should not be tribalistic.
Yes.
And tribe, again, it is the creation of the colonial project to divide black people. In apartheid, in fact, we know that the apartheid system was very clear. Xhosa, you must go to the Transkei.
Yeah.
Venda, they give you a king and a piece of land far away from white civilization. And then all your contribution is for labor, landless, oppressed people, given identities which fractures us by the same common enemy. And that is where I think Steve Biko was so important, because he bridged all these divisions created by the apartheid system to basically break down the black majority into little enclaves of minorities. This is artificial creation of minorities. Because when we one black voice, we are the majority. So it is a creation of the white system to fracture blackness. And even these struggles on the feminist project are part of, in a sense, the same old system of whiteness to divide and rule us.
Yeah, I think that's such an important and great contribution to that discussion. In this antagonistic relationship that we have, which is continuously being proliferated, and even women are incentivized to be championing the idea of being women and feminist, so that then they have a month, so that then they have a quota where they are being employed over the black man. To what detriment is that divide between us? Because it's clear that we've never oppressed black women. If anything, we are better off as allies, as opposed to being antagonistic. To what detriment would that be then if we continue this path of, no, you are toxic masculine, therefore you don't deserve anything? And I remember what you're saying, this example of there was a cleaner during the FISMAS fall who happened to be a man, and because, not FISMAS fall, when they were marching against men, it just so happened that there were people who were sweeping the streets. They don't know anything about what's happening, but just because they are black and they are men, they got the brunt of black women as well. What's the worst thing that will happen as a result of that?
No, you see, it is a very unfortunate development, because the feminist sensibility is what should inform all black struggles. We understand that the woman is the most oppressed in all these oppressive systems, right? And I mean, part of the colonial project was precisely to suppress the black woman. It is, take the Nama people in the land tenure system. The land tenure system of the Nama people was that the woman has the access to land. But when the colonizers arrived, they gave the men what is called a permission to occupy. Of course, they took the land, and then the little land they gave back, they now changed the tenure system and make it male-orientated. So the colonial system does mobilize patriarchy to organize, the hierarchy of the oppressed. So they oppress the men oppress the children and the woman. All of that in service of reproduction of capital, the reproduction of profits by way of oppression. So they oppress the men oppress the woman and the children. But all of this operates to serve interests of white capital, of the colonial capital. We are all the oppressed. And so failure to recognize this brings this pseudo-feminist movement which burns so much energy against the black man. And the black man, we know historically, it's defined or created as the problem by the white system. And so when our sisters reproduce the black man as the problem, they become agents of the white system. And I mean, that is why, even that march you went to the JSE, we understand that the JSE hierarchy then committed to pay financially reward that movement. And so you see there that it is commercialized project which is organized to attack the black man. And so we need to really question whether the feminist project as it unfolds in South Africa, it is part of the liberation project, or it is there to fracture the black possibility of fighting together against a common enemy.
And what has been consistent, of course, with your teachings and everyone who is of black consciousness leaning was that we are black before we are everything. We are black before we are queer. We are black before we are women. We are black before we are Xhosa men. We are black before we are Zulu men.
Of course, the oppressive white system obliterates all the differential possibilities within the black bloc. Amongst ourselves, we could claim to be children or women and men and so on. But from the white system perspective, we're the same problem.
It engages you as black.
Exactly. I mean, for instance, check the violence of the police against the black woman. It is as vicious as dealing with the black man. The same violence against the black child. Blackness has no age, has no gender. Blackness is the problem that whiteness has to suppress and deal with as black. And our response have to also be elevated to a single block which can generate enough power to counter the power of whiteness, which sees us all as the same. In the eyes of whiteness, there's no gender differentiation, not even age differentiations among blacks. And so we need to appreciate that and then unite much better to respond to a common problem which destroys all of us, irrespective of so-called gender or sexuality or even age.
Yeah. Maybe just one more thing that I want to explore on this is I think that the differences are not superficial. They may be superficial in the way that we analyze them, but I think that when a tribal man interacts with a queer student, that difference expresses itself in that relationship, and you will see the uncomfortability between those two people. How do you manage to convince those two people, or even the black woman with a queer man, and they are fighting to have positions at the university for tenure, or whatever it is that they're fighting for, to make them understand that it is not important that you are black, lesbian, or you are a woman, black or colored. You are all the same thing, and we should be fighting against the same system.
A better way to organize our thoughts around this is to recognize the two forms of antagonisms. So Mao Zedong, for instance, teaches us that the antagonism between the oppressed and the oppressor is antagonistic, that differentiation. But the differences amongst the oppressed, there are differences indeed. They are non-antagonistic. The antagonistic differences can be resolved only by way of obliteration of one class by the other. We need to obliterate the oppressor to be liberated from the point of view of the antagonistic differences. The non-antagonistic differences are these differences amongst the people. And those differences do not need us to kill each other. Don't need us to shambok each other. They need us to dialogue, right? Because we are talking about our fathers, our uncles, our aunts, and so on. We're talking about people that we have same life situation in a sense. And these differences are there. Like you write, a young person comes to Joburg, realizes their sexuality is different. They go back home. The home situation is not receptive to this new sexual identity. How do we deal with that? You cannot claim that your family is the oppressor.
Yeah, and they're not the oppressor.
Exactly.
But there are those differences. But your point is that they are non-antagonistic. It's similar to the primary and secondary contradictions.
Yes. So when we deal with the primary contradictions, us and Stellenbosch, there's no negotiation there. It's war to the end. We must defeat Stellenbosch for us to realize liberation. However, the differences, even political differences amongst black people, me and Julius, what are we fighting for? About? What is the thing that is there that can make us so animosity, our animosity must be so big that we are unable to sit down and discuss a common agenda for black people. We don't have that kind of fundamental differences. We don't amongst black people. We have a fundamental differences with the enemy. And the problems that we have as black people is how do we interact with the enemy? Some of us are more receptive to the project of the enemy and so on. And that is why we end up also expending energy amongst ourselves because we need to firstly deal with each other before we deal with the enemy. However, the differences amongst black people are non-antagonistic. They are not fundamental. They can be resolved by understanding, by mutual dialogue, and as I say, understanding. It is there. We come from the same situation. There's nothing that stops us from working together. But we can't work with the enemy. The enemy must be engaged in such a way that we maximize the possibility to defeat and destroy the enemy. But our politics do not make these distinctions. How we engage with differences amongst black people is almost with the same animosity as it is when we have to engage with the enemy. Zuma, for instance, is a figure of political figure. How some of our people, because we lack this understanding of the antagonistic and non-antagonistic differences, our people will have joined hands with the antagonistic enemies of black people against Zuma, whom they would have non-antagonistic differences with. So in this way, we become agents of the real oppressor. We become agents of the antagonistic forces if we don't make the distinction between the non-antagonistic differences which are there amongst us but can be resolved differently from resolving the antagonistic relationships.
Yeah, I suppose we touched on this the last time we spoke. You have to really appreciate the strength and the might of the enemy to the extent that the non-antagonistic differences are primary. They are there. They are there in the media. They are expressed. There's an incentive for black women to fight against black men. There's also an incentive for transgender people to fight against what they call cisgender people. It's so out there.
Another example is our fight with Amakoregwere.
Yes.
And the primary enemy is pushing this agenda so much. As I say, in the 2024 elections, the question that's going to be asked is, bayahamba okanye hayi?
Yeah.
If you try to explain, provide the sophisticated explanation, got to hamba nabo. But that's where we are as a nation, where we are unable to distinguish these two levels of antagonism. And it is the most debilitating project. Once we fail to make these distinctions, we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, and it's there is no space for sophistication. There is no space for nuance anymore. And that's why I'm saying, like, the might of the amount of investment that's being made on all of these platforms, on TV, on podcasts, on newspapers, that we've narrowed down the idea that you are either on the left or you are on the right. There's no space for you to be in between or to be nuanced, really. And the one other thing that I wanted to explore with you, maybe it's also related to this, was the idea of media, social media, demobilizing people. That our rage, we express in the form of social media posts to a point where that's where it ends. 30 years ago, when we have rage and we have an issue that we needed to address, we would go to a community hall and address the issue. And maybe would have people, our ambassadors that need to engage with the authority, that need to fix robots, traffic lights, that needs to fix drains, and the sewage system and the electricity problem that we have. Now we are demobilized as people. You've said at some point that 1994 demobilized black people because it said to black people that there's no problem to be fixed anymore. And I'm extending that to even say that social media, our engagement there and our outrage there is a form of demobilization, because as soon as it trends, it means that we've done the work so that everyone has seen it, but nothing ever happens. We'll go on or move on to the new trend 24 hours later.
No, it is true. The social media era has introduced a very debilitating dynamic in the social practices of people.
Yeah.
Instead of going to, like you say, to a community hall where we congregate as a people and to solve a problem, we all just text. So we are, in a sense, atomized from one another.
Yeah.
We all operating on our little spaces away from each other, and we just clicking and not actually acting. And power will never be disaggregated or empowered in this way. However, the potential for helping us operate as a community through this same system is there. If we think about what happened with
The Arab Spring.
I think it is the best example of how this social media mechanism can be used to organize us. But
the algorithm will mitigate between that being a possibility and not. So what I mean by that is that if it was in the interest of the owners of the social media platforms, which is the West by extension, for them to allow that. So when you post a post as Andile Mngxitama, and I've said this to you that because I'm observant of in the digital media space and I work there, I earn my income there, that there's a point in the last 10 years where your algorithm was so strong with your messaging being consistent that you would easily get 1,000 people engaging in your comment section, up to 10,000 people and so on. But when the algorithm picks up that there is a degree of rebelliousness here, then it suppresses it. So you get a shadow ban. And then, so that means the social media company mitigates between us being able to mobilize amongst ourselves. A post, they say that there is no explanation for this, that why a post would be seen by 10 people today, but a post from the same person, maybe they are posting their half-naked bodies, could be seen by 10,000 people. Same account. So there's the other problem as well, that so we are being demobilized in that they also are able to suppress certain messages from happening or not happening based on whether or not they agree with what is happening. So if black people mobilize as against whiteness in South Africa, that's going to be mitigated. There will not be any free movement of messaging without the algorithm stepping in and saying, this is not going to happen, not on my watch.
You see, this is the power of the white system. It is total. And so we need to always try to be a step ahead. We need to understand the limitations of all the platforms that we're using. And then try to maximize the possibility of spreading our messages in different ways. But the enemy is always there. And you're right, the enemy is very quick. It takes some time. I mean, like Biko. Steve Biko, they thought he was supporting apartheid. That's why they left him for a very long time, because he was saying blacks only, and they were saying black and white must be separated. Yeah. So they misread him.
It's coincidental.
Exactly. But when they realized what his project was, they mad at him. So you're right. I was at some point being paid a lot of money for my opinions. But when they realized that I'm actually anti the white system, more anti than anti the ANC, because I was being promoted because they thought I was anti-ANC. But when my message became much clearer that the problem is not actually the ANC, the problem is that the ANC operates in the interest of the real enemy. When my message started hitting that, they started to ban me. And so, yes, the enemy is total, and our engagement must also be total. We need to understand what the limitations of the platforms that we're using. And then we can't substitute actual organizing of people at community level. We can't substitute it by simply sending Twitters and sending, our Facebook messages. We have to be able to still sit down at the street level with our people and to have these conversations about what is the state of the nation. So we need a new campaign, serious campaign of black conversation at the community, where we ask the question, 30 years of the ANC rule, where we are and what should be the solution moving forward. Almost like the process of the Freedom Charter, which we know was subverted by white people. But they did send people out to go ask, what are your 10 demands? And black people, most of them raised the land question as the biggest issue. Of course, when they brought those slips of information, the white guys disregarded them of the ANC and they wrote the Freedom Charter. I mean, there's a story about a brother who arrived at the conference with his bag full of these messages, and then he just heard them reading the Freedom Charter there at the front, and said, but they didn't take all these messages that come from the people. So we have to go back to the people, to sit down with our people and say, it is 30 years of democracy. There's a real possibility of the ANC working with a white party to sustain the white project, even at the political level. How do you subvert this? So we cannot substitute community engagement, community mobilization with social media work. Social media work must complement the work that we must still do with the actual people on the ground.
That's an interesting point, because 2024 is 30 years since democracy. And I think that our people, we are, well, all of us actually as black people, we are so we are engaged in this pursuit of bread and milk on a day-to-day basis, to a point where we come to terms with our reality and we accept it as it is. There is nothing in our everyday engagement that says to us, let us ask the question of, are we where we wanted to be? Sithume bani ukuba ayosithathela le nkululeko besiyifuna? Is this the country that we envisioned? And what do we do about it? Because even next year, the party with the most votes, with most number of votes, will be the ANC. Whether or not it reaches 50%, it's immaterial. They will still have between 40 to 45%. If we are being generous, we could say 40 to 45% conservative estimation. So at what point you see, I'm sympathetic to people, particularly abantu abamnyama, that they are battled on a day-to-day with things like crime, pursuit of bread and milk, imali yombane, it engrosses them to a point where it doesn't enable them the chance to sit down and ask, where are we going, why are we in the state that we're in right now?
The most important and the most costly commodity today is the space to think. The system does not give us time to think at all. It is like you say, we're worried about bread, we're worried about work, we're worried about what's going on with our children at schools, at universities. And then we must worry about drinking.
Yeah. And it's important that, so drinking is a function of the society. In order for the society to move forward, people must drink. It defeats them into drinking.
Yes. I mean, drinking, of course, is a byproduct of the system, and perpetuating of the system itself. This is why every street in the township there is a tavern.
Yeah,
we are bombarded by all this, including social media. Social media, we are always there, all texting and so on. There is no time to reflect. The one thing, as I say, the most important commodity today and the most expensive, it's time for black people to pause and reflect. We are not being given this space. Even the way political parties are calling for actions. And then when you say, wait, what is this action about? Then they ask you, what are you doing? Because there's this hegemony and the tyranny of activity. You must be always engaged in activity, never to think about what are the consequences of this activity. When we do this, who gets harmed in the long run? Who gets served? The questions of, in a sense, the project of questioning, pausing to reflect, is the one that we need to create deliberately. If we are going to be able to come out the other way with an agenda that serves our purpose, we have to bracket ourselves from the hyperactivity, which is already determined about what its outcomes are going to be. I mean, all these processes which we see, whether we're fighting amongst Hamakwarekwe, we're fighting amongst ourselves, we're fighting in parliament and so on, all of those serve the same interest move us away from the fundamental questions that are facing our people. Where is the land question, for instance?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a joke.
absolutely.
I mean,
And we are almost a year before the next election, and that was the fundamental basis of mobilization. The manifesto of most political parties was speaking to the idea of land expropriation without compensation. That was their darling topic in the last election, which was in 2019. We are now almost a year into the next election, and that has been forgotten. And you were maybe the lone voice in specifically saying that they're going to talk about it now, but trust me, there will be no land expropriation without compensation.
Absolutely. It's tiring in a sense.
Yeah.
Because we can see what these guys are doing. Now they've watered down that land expropriation process into a new bill, which we had submitted also our own contribution. But the new bill of expropriation says that you'll expropriate abandoned land, abandoned buildings, over indebted land, even state land. I mean, state land is already belonging to the people.
State, so who's going to
Exactly.
expropriate it?
So they are not talking about the real land, which is in the hands of a white minority. This is about taking our attention away from resolving the problem. And again, it's part of this hyperactivity process. Now we must talk about this expropriation bill, which will go through the parliamentary mill. And I don't think it is going to go very far, unless, of course, the ANC manages to get the DA to support them to say, but this expropriation is without expropriation. However, white people, once they hear expropriation, they overreact. I mean, Anne Bernstein, one of the thinkers for white capital, she runs a company called CDC, Center for Democracy Development. Yes. She has already said, white capital, don't worry. This land expropriation thing is not about taking your land or your property. It is there to simply appease the black desire for land without addressing it. She has said it herself that white people and white capital must not worry. This talk about land expropriation, as it is now couched, will not touch the fundamental land question. So politics, therefore, has become part of this hyperactivity. That is why in Parliament also there's the acting of difference. When President is going to give his speech of a State of the Nation address, there's going to be some ructions happening there, by headlines tomorrow in the newspaper. But the system continues as it has been. Even as I say, these actions that are going to come now, so-called against the shutdown of the country. There will be no shutdown of the country. There will be generation of new media headlines, as if something is being done, but actually nothing has been done. So that's why I say what we need is to pause and to reflect. This is the one favor we can do ourselves as black people, to say, wait, let's take time out. What has happened in the past 30 years and what is likely to happen in the next 30 years? And then to find a path of a common agenda to rescue ourselves.
It's interesting because I watched a video by Dr. Claude Anderson. He's a respected black scholar. And I think that was in the 90s. I'm 33 years old, and 1990 was 33 years ago. And they were making scientific projections, and they were saying, and it was such a spectacular way to see black men standing up and quantifiably using numbers and science to say, in America, the black man is the official minority in this moment in the 90s. But it is our estimation that by the year 2015, the black man will no longer be the majority minority. The white people are going to tactically allow Hispanics to come in, Mexicans to come in, and they will allow Asians to come in. And that will provide a function because they want to lighten the skin of the American, because their fear of the white American, because their fear is that by the year 2050, all of America will be black, or almost half of it will be black. And it manifested itself because you see now with the number of Asians, the increased number of Asians in America and the increased number of Mexicans in America now, which is the projections that they made 30 years ago came through. And I'm like, it's almost as if we're living in a simulation, that if we don't give ourselves time to think about problems and try to address them, 50 years time, we will suffer more and bigger problems as well. Because one other thing that you've just said now, which I reflected upon last night as I knew that we were going to have this conversation, was I was asking myself that ever since I grew up in the township in Nyanga in Cape Town, I do not remember anyone articulating the idea of land as a primary thing that the black man needs to solve its problem, because we're already logged into these prisons of you are in the township, deal with crime, deal with alcoholism, deal with the lack of work and lack of hope. And you saying that in the lead up to the discussions for the Freedom Charter, black people were specifically raising the land question. And I've lived 33 years of life, and in the township, I've never heard anyone articulating the idea of land. If anything, it's the idea of housing. They want
jobs.
Houses and jobs. As it relates to land and title deeds, they just want housing. It's not like that they want land, to a point where our people are limited so much that they ask, what are we going to do with the land? Because it's claustrophobia of living in the township, that we're caught up in all of these problems, and they are real problems, but we don't have time to think.
You see, the white comrades in the black liberation struggle contributed a lot to the disengagement, this alienation of the black from the land. We are so alienated from land and the minerals and the wealth of this nation that we have no conception that these things belong to us. And so when the Freedom Charter process was couched by these white comrades, they made sure that they institutionalize the disengagement from land into this language of democracy, of rights, and of course, that we must get a job to live. The jobs have become the determining identity of black people, not land. And that is why even now, when we fight against Amakorekore, so to speak, we're fighting about jobs. We're fighting to serve the white man instead of actually fighting to claim the land and to become masters. So I'm saying that part of the white comrades in the ANC was to help to socialize black people into these beings that do not perceive land as such an important aspect of their own existence, but to become workers, to become laborers, in a sense, concluding the process of colonialism, because the process of colonialism is the alienation of the black person from land and creating them into becoming a proletariat that will work for white capital. To live, you'll work for white capital. And that is the system which was designed by white people. And black consciousness is trying to disrupt this normalization of the fact that me and you are workers. To live, we need to work, and to work, we must work for the white system because they own the economy. If you're going to work, invariably, you're going to end up working for the white system.
Yeah.
That's why our children, we take them to university, they become accountants counting money of white people, right? So there's a totality of the white system, but it goes back to how the thoughts of what it means to be free were organized. And the Freedom Charter, I think, is an important point of departure, which institutionalizes this thinking of liberation, meaning labor. We must work. And we got this, in a sense, disengaged from the land question, because the Freedom Charter says the land belongs to us and the white people. All who live in it, yeah. All who live in South Africa in 1955. So our land rights have been taken away from us. But I mean, the thing that was engendered, the primary identity of the black person today is the primary of a worker. You need to work to live. And they took us into the townships, squatter camps, where we are every morning transported to the white system to provide that labor in order to live. So the defeat is is deep in a sense, and it has become embraced into or embroidered into our souls as black people, in this sense that we can't imagine liberation which really liberates, in the sense that this country belongs to us.
Yeah. With this idea of us being driven into accepting that we are supposed to be workers and serving a system, I think that's a factual thing, because the way that life is organized, obviously, every single morning you wake up, you go to work, and there's a consequence if you don't work. You don't have a place to stay, you're homeless, blah 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 blah. I think there is also a move, and I think this is a global move as well, to create what people call welfare states, where there is a guaranteed income, that universal basic income that every adult man and woman will get, and just by being part of a country. But in exchange, it appears as though, I think there is a scenario in China where there's a social security system where it's almost like you are surveilled, basically, where you have a barcode attached to your humanity, and that money is frozen. That universal income that you get from the government is frozen based on you perhaps offending a government. Of course, that could be quantified as traffic stops or you being arrested, whatever. But a lot of people that are analyzing it are saying that it could be one way that the government is going to try and track people. And for example, for every social media post you say against the government, it affects your universal basic income. And every single person has a barcode as well. With these 350s that black South Africans got, you can see that perhaps that could be a move. It's just that we're not sophisticated enough to get there quicker, to then punish people. You're not going to get your 350 because you're making pronouncements against the ANC or against the system of whiteness as well. I think that it is logical to conclude that anywhere in the next 30 to 50 years, that's where most countries are going with this, that you give people money just to pacify them that you don't have jobs, but at least we give you at least 2,000 rands so that you can be able to live on a month-to-month basis. But the takeaway is some of your freedoms. You're not allowed to say this against the government. For every traffic stop every traffic offense, it's going to affect the money that you get from the government.
Of course, oppression operates on the basis of coercion and consent. So in South Africa today, white people have been able to turn us into consenting slaves. We accept the status quo because of the dominant ideas which they generate, and they keep on generating, whether it is fighting the Guptas or fighting Zuma instead of fighting the actual oppressors. It is part of these ideas to bring about consent. We consent to our oppression. Now, coercion is part of this surveillance system, which capitalism is worried that people are going to rebel. But capitalism is always thinking ahead. How do we keep these people slaves? Now, technological advancements provide this possibility for surveillance of every single individual. In fact, it is so advanced that they can even now start thinking about our thoughts. Our thoughts themselves are being anticipated. So what we're trying to do, they anticipate and provide a counter to that. We end up becoming their agents, even unwittingly. That is how sophisticated the whole capitalist system has become in the 21st century. However, technology should be used for emancipation. We have to find a way in which technology is decolonized so that it can serve the interests of all. But under capitalism, technology is a tool of oppression, is a tool of money making, is a tool, like we say in South Africa today with the podcasting industry. The potential for the podcasting industry to become counter-hegemonic is there, but it will not be, because the powers that be provides incentives for those that serve its interest. And you don't have to be hired by Rupert. You just have to look at who is making it. What kind of messaging are they doing? What kind of activity are they engaged in? You engage in those, you then get the kind of rewards that are there from the white system to make sure that it perpetuates itself. It does not have to have principals who are giving you instructions. You just look at what is hegemonic, what pays, what is rewarded in society, and you do that. And that is how the system perpetuates itself. So technology is a double-edged sword. Right now, it is increasingly used to suppress, to be part of the state surveillance system, and it can be used to make us proper slaves. In these ways where the state knows exactly what we are doing at every moment, and then punishment will be accordingly organized.
Yeah, it's scary, and the point that you made about us thinking about where we want to be, like making a concerted effort to think that this is our plan, this is where we want to be. If we allow things to be as they are now, I do anticipate that, yes, there will be some sort of rebellious formation or rebellious activity, people marching and burning things down. But 30 years down the line, I do think that things will be worse than they are now. The amount of time that we spend on social media, on TikTok and all of that will be tripled if it's possible, because you only have 24 hours in a day. And the messaging there, as you say, social media or technology anticipates what we like. Because for as long as your phone is on, your smartphone is on, even with this conversation, everyone with a smartphone here, it can hear what we say. But for now, it's being used to pick up things like, what products are we talking about? Whether we're mentioning words like Omo or sneakers. And the first thing that will happen is that as soon as you scroll up on your Facebook, at some point there will be an ad specifically tuned to your liking of sneakers or a detergent that you spoke about 3 hours ago. But I think that at some point it will be very worse, because your phone tells you where you are because your location is on. So the government knows where you are now. If there wasn't a labor challenge, maybe because it asks you, do you allow us to have access to your data? Every time you have a new app, do you allow us to have access to your folders? You always say yes because you want to use that app. Now, that allowance of recording means that when your phone is idle and not doing anything, it is actually recording a phone conversation that you cannot know where is it storing it, whether or not it's storing it, and who's listening to it. Maybe because of the challenge of labor, there's no bunch of 1 million people somewhere in a call center listening to our conversations. But what it does do, and it does it efficiently, is to tailor advertisements to your specific liking so that it maximizes the potential for you to buy. That's still at a level of capitalism for now, but it will extend itself to it being tyrannical, where we're now tracking everything that you write on social media and stuff like that. And I think if we're not conscious, as you say, about where 2024 is symbolic, 30 years, that's an adult human being. 30-year-old supposed to be a responsible adult human being. That's symbolic, that we should ask ourselves, what has happened with us? It is not enough that 12 million people decide not to vote. You are demobilizing yourself and you are working or acting against yourself if you decide not to vote. It's not enough that you turn your back against the voting system. In the meantime, whilst we're working on another voting system or electoral system, we can still vote for parties that we think could be in our favor, work in our favor, work on our behalf. But 30 years, we have to reflect. Otherwise, in 50 years, we will be significantly worse than where we are now.
No, the black community in South Africa, and I think globally, is faced with real challenges. And South Africa was supposed to be the hope because we have two things. We have numerical strength, which other black spaces don't have, like in the US. Black people do not have the numerical strength that we have. Secondly, we are endowed with so much natural resources. I mean, some of our gold, our platinum and all that, it's world beaters. So we have the possibility, therefore, to resolve the problem of black people and to set an example as a society which is taking care of black people. We have this potential, we have this possibility. But we have squandered it because we did not develop a black agenda. We don't have a black agenda that determines where black people should have been. By now, we should be saying, but in terms of the commitment made in 1994, this is where black people should be, and they are not there. How do we make sure that we move towards that? That is why I think the biggest favor that we are going to make for ourselves as black people is to pause and to reflect. And that is why we're going to work so hard to call for a conference of black people. And so all of us, hopefully we can get there and come up with the top 10 priorities to stop the calamity which is coming and will be inaugurated next year. This year we must be able to provide a 30-year projection of where we should be as black people and what steps we need to take to get there. What we need to do to stop the current road. And look, whatever we say, the solution is political. Political power is what gave white people all the wealth that they have. Because they used that political power ruthlessly to serve the interests of white people. They excluded us from the political system precisely because they wanted to create a false majority. And then once they have that false majority, which is white, they legislated for whiteness. They even legislated apartheid to say, black people, you are not be part of South Africa.
Yeah.
You are going to go to their homelands. They legislated the Land Act, which says 13% of the land will be reserved to black people. So white people have all this other land, 87%. They legislated that and they made it happen. They created companies, all this, even including Media 24 today, with the creation of the white system, where money was allocated from the state to create white wealth. The insurance companies which are there today, the banking systems were all a consequence of political decision. And of course, they had the thing that we must think about, the Broederbond, which was the think tank for white people. The Broederbond was supposedly an underground organization. Of course, it was funded for his operation by the apartheid system, but it was so powerful because it determined who must become president. Because they have determined that that person will serve the interests of the Afrikaner establishment. We don't have this. We appoint whoever speaks the loudest, sponsored by white capital. Our leaders are picked by white capital. We are disenfranchised as a black majority. And I think part of the conversation that we're going to have is how we make sure that we use our numerical strength to address our interests.
All right. You had an interesting conversation with Vuyo Zungola. He was here. We had a great conversation too. About a lot of things, ESCOM and everything else. I know that you've been engaging. You are the leader of the Black First, Land First political party. And next year are elections. There has been a call for black parties, particularly smaller black parties, to work together. There is a strong possibility of a coalition government next year. There are a lot of interesting possibilities on the political front next year. Can you please allow us into those kind of conversations that you would have had with the ATM and any other political movement? And what kind of expectations do you have for those relationships, concessions, expectations, and whether or not you would be going alone then if there is no working relationship with any other party?
Going alone is suicidal. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't go to the 2024 elections as different parties. If we agree on black consciousness and Pan-Africanism and RET, those are the basis for us to establish a single platform for 2024. Black First, Land First is in advanced discussion with the Land Party. In fact, month end, we invited to their rally in the Western Cape where they are strongly based. Our discussions are very advanced with the Land Party. If we just give you the breakdown of our voting strength, PLF is about 20,000 party and the Land Party is about 8,000. So together we'll have about 28,000 votes. And that will certainly give us a seat in parliament. Now, that those conversations are at advanced stage, but we've also started conversation with the ATM. And again, meeting Vuyo Zungula, he's a very agreeable person. The rapport between us is actually amazing. I'll be very happy to work with him. I'll be very happy to work even with him as my leader. That is the sacrifices that we have to make to bring about this unity of the black political parties. It will be even better if we can get AZAPO and the PAC into that arrangement, and we all of us go into these elections as a single party. I believe that we will get better response from our people, and we'll be able to provide a platform to advance the black agenda. It doesn't serve anyone's interest that we are all going to put 100,000 each for the deposit, and we must get the T-shirts, and we must get the money for it. It's just wasting our resources. We're fracturing our votes. We must bring together our votes and vote as a single block. I am very, very positive that Black First Land First will go with the ATM and the Land Party towards the next elections.
Yeah, what does that mean at a practical level? Does it mean a new party with new colors, or it's an aggregation of all the votes after the count is done?
No, in South Africa, unfortunately, you can't do that. So we will have to go with one party. And
so that could be the ATM, for example.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. My conversation with the Land Party was that if we go into that arrangement, BLF Land Party, then it will be BLF only because of our strength, right?
Numerically.
Yes. But if we then work with the ATM, we'll go with the ATM because of the numerical strength as compared to both the Land Party and Black First Land First. And of course, we'll have to decide. And that is the point of real contention.
Yeah.
Where do we place on the list these other parties? So, for instance, in my conversation, if I were to reveal this, the proposal which will be discussed further is the ATM already has 2 members of parliament. So if we were to engage BLF, we'll have to place it number 3 in their list.
Their parliamentary list.
Yes, that will be the most agreeable proposition. But these things are still up for discussion. We'll see if that proposal will fly. But I'm revealing what I shouldn't be revealing.
Thank you for entrusting us with that information. I think I wanna hover around this a little bit longer as well. What does it mean to the identity? Let's say that you're part of ATM, the Land Party, yourselves, PLF, you're part of ATM, for example. What does that mean for PLF and the Land Party, for example? Does it mean that it's a party that if there's any fracture along the way, you can always be PLF? Does it mean that you're now a member of... Because I can imagine that there is no member of... Well, there is a member of the ANC who's still part of COSATU, member of the ANC who's still part of SACP as well. So there's the SACP is always the SACP, but when they're voting with the ANC, for example. So I'm talking about the identity, because a lot of groundwork has been done for all these parties that you're talking about, the Land Party, your party, for example. So what becomes of those parties when the merger happens, at least at a level of everyone knowing that you're now a member of the ATM?
We joined the ATM for the purpose of electoral unity. So it's a very specific purpose.
Okay.
We will maintain our different parties. And of course, if we work well together, there might even be a call down the line to submerge all the parties into one. I don't think there will be resistance. Of course, we're going to work with the Land Party and the ATM, and we are BLF. So there's going to be those questions. Also, can we sustain this thing? How long can it go? So those questions, if they can get resolved over time, if we work well, we gel as a working group, And then I think that down the line, there will be a call, look, let us create one big party, invite others as well, and let's provide that political solution to our people. We want a political solution. This is the problem. And forming a BLF was part of finding a political solution. And if there's a easier way to get to this political solution by working with others, we certainly must subscribe to that. We only worry about the ideological direction. And ideologically, there's no difference between us, the Land Party, the ATM, the PAC, AZAPO. All these 5 parties, we should be in the same slate coming 2024.
Yeah. And why wouldn't an EFF? I probably know the answer to this, but for the benefit of the audience, why would that be a more difficult discussion with the EFF, or no discussion at all with the EFF?
Firstly, the EFF believes that it is the fastest growing movement, so there's that arrogance of numbers. But ideologically also, it has fought with all the people that we defend. Ourselves and the ATM, for instance, would be pro kind of Zuma, move. The EFF has fought with them, has fought with Brian Molefe, has fought with Dudu Myeni, fought with Hlaudi Motsoeneng. All these black leaders, we believe, are part of a transformatory agenda. So the ideological questions there, which must still be worked on. In a sense, EFF is part of the left, but closer to the right. These other groups, there's very little that differentiate them. And I think if we create a momentum with these groups, which should be in the same basket, it will be easy to deal with the EFF then.
Yeah, I'm always circumspect with everything that I do as it relates to strong personalities working together. I think experience teaches us a lot. We didn't just get delivered from the maternity ward today. As Zalwanga namhlanje, we know that strong leaders are strong leaders.
Yeah.
Every time there is a working together partnership between people, in the last 10 years, I've just learned that eventually somewhere down the line, there will be a clash of personalities as well. I suppose that's one of the things that you would anticipate as well. You saying that you are happy to work under a leader, you are submitting yourself to work under a leader. Are you ready for that? Is not something that you're worried about, that at some point there's going to be a fractious disengagement, and sometimes
it's we have to keep on trying to do the right thing. If unity is the right thing, we have to try it. But mindful, of course, of experiences of the past. Now, for me, the most important thing is to see if there's minimum political agreements, and the personality issues should be managed better. But as black people, we're failing to manage,
unfortunately,
personality problems. It's a serious indictment, which we recognize it as a problem. Therefore, we must take extraordinary commitment to undermining that problem, the personality differences. I think that will be the only thing that would, in a sense, fracture this possibility for unity. If I look at Zungula, his demeanor is not of a bossy one. He's not trying to impose himself. And that, I think, creates a very fertile possibility for us working together with other leaders. I mean, if leaders from AZAPO, PAC were to come into that arrangement and we all converge around him, maybe this thing could work.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Even the PAC, you don't even know who's the leader. Like, somewhere down the line, there's so many squabbles for presidency. And as a result of that, every single year since 2004, there's a decline. 2009, decline. 2014, decline. 2019, decline. And the undercurrent of that is that you don't know who's the president. All the time, you always don't know who's the president of that movement as well. I was in a meeting with people that I do business with, and when we got out of there, this is an analogy about strong personalities, because we are like Cavalian sometimes, even the way that we approach issues. So there's a loss in the balance sheet and all of that stuff. We're not fighting about that because losses happen. As long as the business is in a healthy position, we'll solve that. But as soon as we got out there, like these white people, they're weighing each other out. Like, hey, this one is weaker than this one. And like, you see, like whenever there's strong personalities, it's like, eventually you will always say, hey, the way in which you handled that situation, I know that I'm sharper than you, that I could have handled it better. And it's a huge challenge to be able to submit yourself to a leadership. That's, for me, I find discomfort in working, because I'm always like, I don't like working for people who are less talented than me. Because as soon as they open their mouth and they're providing a solution, I already see a problem with what they're saying. I'm like, oh, you didn't think this through, type of thing. So I look forward to that union. And I hope it happens, that you guys merge as smaller political parties. Do you think you would have too much of a disagreement in terms of government of national coalition? Because there's multiple possibilities. There's a possibility, and this is an interesting challenge for you guys if it happens. There's a possibility of an EFF working together with a DA for a government of national coalition, and they may need your 5%, for example, to make it a majority. Whereas perhaps that 5% could be good enough for the ANC to give it like a 51%, for example. So now there would be people who would be anti-ANC, would be like, no, we can't go with the ANC. And you will be specific that you don't work with enemies of black people like the DA. So those are like some of the challenges if we get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, the first, the preferred arrangement will be if the ANC gets 45% or less, and we come with 10%, and then we enter into a coalition with the ANC. Working with the DA is out of the question completely for us. The ANC can be pushed to the left and be pushed to respond to the black agenda only because it is a black party. Even if in its DNA it is of course white, it can be better pushed towards a black agenda than if you were to go into coalition with the DA. I mean, on what national question can we agree with the DA? On the land question, we are not going to agree. On transformation and the race question, we're not going to agree. So what will be the basis ideologically for us to work with the DA, except to say the ANC is corrupt? I mean, and the DA itself is corrupt. So we don't have a principal basis to work with the DA at all. We would hope that black parties can provide the ANC with an agenda of governance to say, this is how things are going to be run from now. And this is the basis for which we will support your presidency, to then co-govern for a black agenda, which is clearly articulated. Our agreement must be based on a minimum program, which already they have articulated as the RET. So we're going to force the ANC into basically implementing its own program, which right now does not have the acumen or the political will or the courage to implement.
Yeah, it's interesting because the DA is expressing its willingness to work with the ANC, provided that Cyril Ramaphosa is their president.
Of course, the ANC is available for the right wing, and the ANC is available towards a left-leaning process. White capital believes that the ANC of Ramaphosa will continue to sustain the project of white supremacy. And that is why the DA will be comfortable to give Ramaphosa the presidency, to work with them, and then they'll become probably deputy president and so on. Because Ramaphosa has proven to be a very reliable agent of whiteness. And so they want him there, they will be able to co-govern. It is the most unfortunate thing because it means black votes are going to be used very directly to implement a white supremacist project. But that possibility is there, and Ramaphosa will prefer that than to work with us, for instance. If you imagine Azapo, PAC, ourselves, ATM, working with Ramaphosa's government, we will just be a serious thorn on his side, because we're going to keep on saying you have to do. Imagine me as the Minister of Land Affairs, for instance.
I'm imagining the PAC in that arrangement. I don't know if they would be willing to work with the ANC, the PAC, given their history. I don't know if they would want to even go to bed with the ANC.
I think once we come into an agreement as these black parties, we will be able to articulate a program under which we'll work with the ANC. And that project will be a black agenda. And I think that it will still be on the radical economic transformation type arrangement. The ANC has nominally agreed to that, but we know that they don't have the courage to implement it. We do. And so we'll say to the ANC, look, we need to do these things. If you agree, which are your things, then we'll see how politically we manage things, who gets what positions and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It is my preferred outcome of the 2024 elections.
Gogo Macheko, sorry, always makes enlightening political interventions, and it's very nice to listen to him. He makes you hope for a better country and a better tomorrow for black people. One of his favorite lines is, a society that is the antithesis of apartheid society. So a South Africa that works for black people. And I don't know if we would ever get to a point where we are living in a society that is the antithesis of apartheid society. What we are living in now is the continuation of apartheid South Africa. Of course, it's much more palatable because there are no illegalities of black bodies and all of that shit. What does a South Africa that works for the people who own this place, who are from Africa, what does it look like for you?
You have to have a better, faith.
I'm pessimistic. My pessimism comes from the township. So in the township, every single time you have to go to the shop, you have to work out, okay, from this street corner, there are a couple of dudes that are sitting there. You have 10 rand in your hand. How do you get to the shop without the 10 rand leaving your hand? Yeah, bro. Like you have this 10 rand, you sent to the shop to buy mutlakase. How do I get there without these guys taking it? Okay, I could change direction, go to a different shop. When you go to a different shop, there's a possibility of guys standing literally at the counter waiting for people to buy, especially young kids. So the township shapes your pessimism. Every single time you go to a shop or you go somewhere, every single time you go out at 9 o'clock, it's dark, the street lights are not working, you are calculating whether or not it's a good idea to get out. So then you become pessimistic. You're very observant. So that is shaped by that. And of course, people behave consistently. This country has been consistent in its anti-blackness. There's nothing about this country that says to me that we'll get there, but I don't want to take the optimism out of you. What does a South Africa that works for its people look like for you?
You see, in the struggle between the Irish people and the British imperialism, they had, the British were boasting about how they defeating them. And one of their leaders of the Sinn Féin said, yeah, you will have these successes. We just need one success. That's all we need. Just one success. Just like this boy who must navigate the difficult terrain in the township to go get motlakase. Somehow they do get to buy the motlakase. Yeah. So we need to allow ourselves the hope that we will get one shot, which will give us the possibility to change the circumstances of our people. I shudder to think about the alternative, which is to disengage and to stop dreaming about a liberated people. Then it means that all the efforts and the sacrifices of all the people, the greats that we have in the past, will be for nothing. We have to fail, but fail better. And be like the ocean that comes all the time to the shore and back. And one time there will be a tsunami. Maybe it will not happen in my lifetime, but I hope that we can plant seeds of a vision for black people that can live in freedom and in dignity in a country that God has given us. If I were to forgo this fantasy, then it will be the end of history. It will be the end of imagination. It will be the end of hope. And that for me is the worst scenario that we can find ourselves in. So we must keep on planting these seeds. Even if next season nothing happens, we must plant again. Something will give, I believe. Now we have the possibility to unite black political parties. And this unity, see, it is out of necessity. We collectively survive or individually perish. So necessity is bringing us to a point where we have to think differently and to act differently for collective survival. I think that once we get these political leaders into one room and we talk about how we need to move forward and what are the benefits of moving together, we might just get the first real unity of the black left political parties. Is it sustainable? I don't know. But it's something that we have to work towards.
Yeah, I explore the idea of money and politics with Mr. Vuyezungula. And we spoke about, and he gave some examples of clearly there is an exchange of money to influence parliamentarians in South Africa so that then laws are implemented that are in the favor of people who have money. This is a global phenomenon, unfortunately. And you and I have spoken about the equivalent of getting a certain amount of seats in parliament versus the money that you have to spend. It's like in football, for every 10 million you spend, you get yourself closer and closer to the top of the league, such that if you spend 100 million, you are almost guaranteed that you will win the league, which pays you only 15 million when you win it. But the more expenditure on quality players, it's not futile expenditure. You're paying for quality players, sometimes obliterating a market where your opposition or your enemies can't even fight. They can't. If you're offering 50 million for a football player, they cannot, because the normal prices 2 weeks ago was 1 million. Now you're offering 50 or 20 for average normal players. So there's like this relationship between money and how many seats you get in parliament because of the investment in billboards, in t-shirts, in media time and all of that. Can you help us explore this idea of money and parliament and parliamentarians and how far you can go? Because there's only so much you can go with your own 2 feet. If you have a car, you drive further. If you have a truck, you can go to another country. Can you please help us there?
Now, it is true that electoral outcomes are determined by money. In the last elections, we calculate that EFF must have paid about 500 million and more.
That's a ridiculous amount of money.
Yes. I mean, and others.
There's no single individual donor who can give you that amount of money.
Well, if we take just the
amongst ourselves.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So money is being organized by other forces into the South African political system. And that is why we're saying that one of the equalizing system is to put a cap on how much parties can spend on elections, because that would equalize the playing field a little bit. But we have to substitute people with money with people. We have to be able to have such a message where money, in a sense, will be undermined by the message and the vision and the quality of leadership that we provide against money. So we are competing against money. There's no doubt about it. The question is, can we successfully present a vision and a quality leadership which can be attractive to the people in such a way that we undermine the impact of money in the electoral system? It's not going to be easy. We still need some money even to present that new leadership and a new program. Who's going to give us this money? Well, we hope that some black people with a bit of money, when they see that we are united, we are presenting a new vision, they will be able to have some kind of confidence in us, and they will provide the resources for that. But over and above that, we must ask for money from our people. The churches in South Africa are wealthy and their members are poor. So the poor members provide these resources for the thing they believe in. We believe that our people must also do the same. If we provide a good leadership possibility and a good program to liberate our people.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Well, sometimes politics become spectator sport, even though they have a direct impact on our lives. It's like I keep on saying I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to a nightmare. Sometimes I'm looking forward to seeing a political
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
If we failed to go to the next elections as united parties, if we fail to provide this minimum agenda, I'm getting out of politics completely, because it will be the end of my efforts in organized politics. If we can't unite and provide this vision and this platform, I personally will get disengaged in politics, because I think I shall have failed in the formal political sense.
Yeah, and it's an interesting game, formal politics, because you're sharp, you're very bright, and you've been able to shape young men like myself into seeing the world better and understanding that this world is not how it's supposed to be for Black people, particularly in their own continent, in their own country. Things should be better. But it's a different ball game to have that message spread out to millions of South Africans so that they say, I'm giving this man my vote, because it's a more sophisticated way of getting there in the first place. How do you transport that message to get it to the people? So formal politics are very interesting, actually, because you have to actually be a member of a political party and be a career politician. You have to work your way into becoming a youth league leader and therefore become a deputy secretary general at some point in your life of a political party. And if you play
the factional battle well.
If you play the factional battle game well enough, you might, because you could not even be the chosen guy for the system, because there is a hand.
Also that,
there's an invisible hand.
You must be anointed.
Yeah, the invisible hand must anoint you with, okay, this one will deliver us. Before I let you go, I need to ask you something I've been itching to ask you. I had Pops Muhammad coming here a few weeks ago. We spoke about jazz music, spoke about a lot of things, and I asked him, how does it feel to be 74 years old, for example? He's done amazing work. He's gone to Namibia to sample the San people, their sounds, and he infused that with jazz as well. He's lived a fulfilled life being creative artistically. I'm always curious about people's experiences. When I told you that I thought you were dead at some point because I got a call to say that no one knew what was going to happen to you. How does it feel to almost die? Did you see?
Yeah. That experience has just slowed me down a little.
Yes.
In many ways, I'm more reflective and I appreciate life a bit better. My family also, people are close to me. And I think there's a spiritual strengthening as well. When I was under there, for the first 3 weeks, I was in a coma. I used to see these visions of 4 Black old ladies looking over me, looking after me, and there was this guy who was doing sacrifices all the time, who will never give me any attention because I wanted him to get me out of this light which was shining there. I'm told that if I succeeded to get his attention, I would have gone. So that was a deep spiritual, in a sense, experience. And the doctors, of course, called me a miracle patient. They said that they thought I was gone. So I'm slowing down a little, and also just saying, look, I need to make certain contributions now, and I need to know when to stop, and to take a different path. So I think that's, in a sense, there's some kind of finality to my decisions since the experience. I know that I'm not here forever. So death is real. And I think about also what will happen to my children when I'm not there. I'm thinking a lot about this afterlife, which was never something that occupied my mind. But I'm not scared of death. I think I'm ready for it in ways that I was never before. I was very close to Ngqawana.
Oh.
And that man, he had made peace with life and death. And he spoke about death and life almost in the same breath. Him and his friend, another one who died as well, Dr. Wadada Mdluli, they used to spend days without saying a word to each other a day, saying Bapusha silence. They're just reflecting into themselves. And the evening, they'll invite all of us to come and feast. They'll say they're feasting for death. But Zim believed that, you live with death. Death is not something which is outside of life itself. So you get, I think, a better peace with that ending. I'm not dying. I'm just reflecting on that real situation which I was confronted with. I think I take things a little bit easier now. Even disappointments, I consume them much better. And I hope that this kind of positive energy, which I think I now possess, can help me to have the next stance of my life different.
Was writing the only outlet creatively for you, or did they influence you in any way using Ngqawana to do jazz or anything like that?
No, I was just always writing. I'm also very uncultured in this sense. When I go into that space of Ngqawana, for me, it was a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
It's something that I could not articulate. There was one time at this farm, he had a session, and then everybody left, and we were sitting there as friends. I think 3 a.m. He called in Duduzo Makhathini.
Yes, Nduduzo Makhathini, yes, the
Duduzo,
pianist.
Yes, and Kyle Shepard.
How old would Nduduzo would have been?
Yeah, I think they were very young, and
Yes.
I understand. Yes. My brother.
Oh my word.
And then even Xilongo, Uzim,
Yes.
he started playing the Xilongo, and then he said we must go to the chapel where they played in. He call it the chapel, and they start playing. I have never experienced any moment like that. I literally felt like I was taken outside the roof and I was sitting on top of the house. But that is the kind of musical journey that Zim was able to create with that group of performers. And I don't think they'll ever perform at that level again. It was a real spiritual experience. And for me, I see them as high priests, if you like, who bafaka inkonzo. The other day, I listened to Mandisi.
Mandisi Changes.
Yes. Man, that guy is also a bishop.
And you see the congregation.
Yes.
The number of people that are there.
Yes.
The women and the men.
And how they interact with the bishop.
They know all of his songs.
Man, it's an incredible thing.
In 2023, where people don't buy albums, they know all of his songs and they are there. If he says, I'm in Kirstenbosch, sold out. He was supposed to be here, sold out. I've never seen a selling out of something that has been made available 5 minutes ago. Sold out immediately. I'm like, no, but we want to go, but sold out.
Yeah.
And if you see him engaging and interacting with that crowd,
It's amazing.
It's phenomenal.
It's amazing. I mean, the same with Tumi Mokgorosi is one of the real cerebral, if you like, thinking producers of music, and he's deeply immersed in the black idiom. But yeah, that's where we are. We, in a sense, black consciousness was always the totality of the involvement.
Yeah.
That is why it was also a cultural movement. Abolififitladi, Ingwapele Madingwane, and many others, even, I mean, artists of black consciousness. I mean, the art they produced was always reflective of this possibility for black people to liberate themselves.
Yeah. Sibetwe load shedding Ramaphosa.
Okay.
But yeah, the lights are on this. They can still hear us and see us. We're fortunate enough to have an inverter that only lasts 1 hour sometimes.
Okay.
But yeah, we were wrapping up. Matota, Ngqawana performing with Kyle Shepherd, and then Duduzo Makatini happens to be there, and Ayanda Sikade happens to be there. I always say that South African jazz musicians are the Rolls Royce of musicians across all genres of music, because they take you to a place. There's one song, it's called Eulogies of something, Guzimology album Ngqawana, that every time when I hear of someone's death, I think there's a flute predominantly playing. Because I'm a hip hop kid. I had to learn jazz growing up, because you learn jazz through an adult's influence.
Yeah.
They play it in front of you in order for you to know it. If you miss that part, then you have to learn it by yourself. You fill in the gaps. I know all of these musicians because I had to fill in those gaps and like, okay, what is this? Who's Nduduzo Makatini? Who is Ayanda Sikade? Ayanda Sikade has a song called Ilungelo, which is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal album. Maybe parting short, because you never know. The moment that I have with you, I always appreciate. Ngqawana, spiritually, as a human being, what kind of man was he? And even the playing of the music, like, what did you take away from that relationship?
I think it's the totality of going deep into the human experience, because he was so aware of the different dimensions of life, here and the hereafter, and for him they were intertwined, but he was always inviting us to reflect on what this means. What does it mean to be alive today? What does it mean to be free, for instance?
Yeah.
He refused to go to Robben Island to perform there. He said he'll go there as a political prisoner. Because he asked the question, you are president of what? This man was questioning deeply. I mean, he's the one who made me start questioning, for instance, Africa. He asked the questions around who named this continent. So he was even his Xhosaness, he was beginning to question that as well.
Yeah.
And then he said that he was ready to transition. So he lived his life prepared for the hereafter. And he was always inviting all those around him to feast on the current life, in a sense of experiencing it in its totality, but ethically as well, because he hated oppression. I just shared with my Facebook group the other day that Zim was going to a jazz performance by some Japanese woman, and
Keiko Matsui.
I think it is. And then mid-performance, he tapped his friend Wadada Mdluli. He said, Wadada, let's go. This woman is too happy. We can't allow ourselves to be so happy in a world which is so unjust.
Yeah.
So, that's the kind of a person that Zim was. And he was highly educated. He knew so much. And he was unconventional in his way of life and how he interacted with others, and even how he make music. He started talking about making music in real time, no rehearsals.
Yeah.
He says, no, there's no rehearsals. We eat, we have a communion together, we check each other's energies, and then we create music in real time.
Baba Mngxitama masibulele ndoda.
Enkosi tata.
Sibulele kakhulu as always. Thank you so much. Siphila kulezo lobu capital ke. Unfortunately, we have to look at the clocks every time we speak.
No, that is true.
Thank you so much to everyone who's watching.
Thanks for the invite, Nkululeko.
Yeah, thank you. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and comment on the content. Thank you very much for watching.